Hey guys, Lockie here from Element, and this is a quick video for those coming to our mountain bike photography workshop at Gap Creek on Sunday. But if you also haven't signed up and you're interested in sports photography of any kind, it doesn't have to be mountain biking you're into, it's not too late. Come along and join us, and it's going to be a fun day. A few things to think about before coming along. In your camera, it's definitely worth looking at a few settings to familiarize. Number one, make sure you set your date and time. It is mostly useful when you have to go back and sync multiple cameras together and check that the time is correct, but it's also just worth doing in general. Beyond that, have a think about what format file you want to shoot. There's the option to shoot in RAW or JPEG, or you can shoot RAW plus JPEG if you want to. RAW gives you a lot more detail in the file. It gives you the highlights, the shadows, a bit more color information, but it's going to be a much bigger file. It's also going to look a bit flatter until you edit it, so you have to put some effort into editing it later on. There's free programs and there's paid programs you can use for your editing. And it's going to require you to edit and export the photo to share it, which is, not quite as easy as a JPEG file, which you just take and can send off relatively quickly and anyone can open it and websites can use them. But for me, I'm always shooting in RAW because I'm going to edit them and it gives me a lot more detail, and I can't tell you the amount of times when you're shooting quickly, it saves photos because it gives you more information in the highlights that you don't realize are there. It's definitely worth doing and trying. If you're unsure, shoot RAW plus JPEG and then you get the best of both worlds. Just a quick note on that. RAW, when you're shooting in RAW, even if your camera's color profile is set to, doesn't matter what, whether it's monochrome or vivid or standard, the RAW kind of overrides that. It's always going to look the same no matter what that color profile is. The color profile is dedicated to when you're shooting JPEG and what shows on the back of your screen. It's not actually affecting the RAW file, so it's worth keeping that in mind. JPEG, whatever you choose, is baked in and you can't change it later, and it's harder to edit things like white balance and color. Okay, so keep that in mind. One setting that I think is very much useful for mountain biking, you'll know that your camera can autofocus. At least I hope you have an auto-focusing system. You can set it to choose anywhere in your frame to try and focus, and the camera will choose what it wants to focus on. But if you want to give it a bit of help, especially mountain biking when you're tracking a rider coming towards you, single point focus, where you can move that single point around the screen, is definitely what you'll need to do to try and get that rider sharp. It otherwise, and especially if you're trying to shoot through trees or surrounding people on the edge of the frame, you kind of need to tell it where to focus. You also need to make sure that when you hold that shutter button down on the single point, that it continues to focus as the rider moves. So there is a setting, it's called, on a Nikon, it's continuous focus. I think it's AFC as opposed to AFA or AFS. And on a Canon, I believe it's called servo, but basically it's worth testing. Take a photo of your hand or something moving and move it around and make sure your camera continues to focus once you're holding that shutter button down. The other thing to be wary of is where to change your camera's settings from taking one shot when you push the shutter down to taking a burst of shots. So as you hold your shutter down, it'll take a series of photos. On mine, it's this sort of back dial underneath. I can change it from single shot to continuous low, continuous high, and choose how many photos I want to take in a row that way by just holding it down. In terms of shooting mode on your camera, let's have a quick look and refresh it. So I won't go into too much detail here, but the exposure triangle sort of dictates how much light comes into your camera and how well exposed it is for the conditions. So you've got aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Your shutter speed is how quick your camera goes click, click. And if you do a fast shutter speed, 1/4000th of a second or 1/2000th is quite fast, it will be quite sharp what you're shooting generally. If you're shooting, 1/10th of a second or 1 second long, or longer, it's good for waterfalls or night skies and things like that, or light painting, but it can cause a lot of blur in your image. Your aperture is within the lens and how wide open your lens is. So if I was to have a look at that, that shows how much light comes into the camera sensor by the lens. And then the ISO is how sensitive your sensor is to light and how quickly it sort of soaks it in. The trade-off with ISO is the higher the number, the more grainy or noisy your image becomes. So keep that in mind. Those three need to all balance together to get a nicely exposed image. You can shoot in manual mode where you change, so on here, top dial of mine, I can stick it to M, manual mode, where I change everything individually. Shutter mode is the one I recommend to people who are getting into sports photography, where you set something like 1/1000th or 1/500th of a second for your shutter speed and let the other settings fall into place automatically by the camera. Or you can do aperture priority, or the other one I tend to use a fair bit of is manual mode, but with auto ISO turned on. So I like to start, if I'm outdoors shooting an event, 1/1000th is a nice sharp shutter speed, and f4 is still fairly shallow, but I don't tend to go all the way down to f2.8, which is wide open and shallower depth of field, because depth of field is also affected by your aperture. And I do change that aperture depending on what type of shots I'm taking sometimes. For example, if it's a group of people and in a couple of rows, I will make sure I'm not shooting shallow f2.8 or f4. I will bump it up to f7 or f9, f11 outdoors to make sure it's got a fair bit in focus. That's getting into the weeds a little bit. Let's continue. If you're into, really into your sports photography and you are playing with flashes, you can add a bit of extra light onto the subject. So a transmitter goes on your camera, a receiver or multiple receivers. You can have front side-on lights, backlights, and get quite fancy. And it allows you to keep the background a bit darker and more vivid in color and just add a bit of extra light on the subject. You can, like anything, you can do it well and you can do it badly. It takes a bit of practice to find the best angle, the best way to light the subject without blowing out everything around it as well. But it is a bit of fun. And there's other systems. The Godox are pretty compatible with more of my cameras, so I'm moving to them, and it's got a nice digital display on it. And if you're getting to the point of shooting like me, where you have to shoot many, many riders in a row at times, both of those systems come with their own additional battery packs which plug into the flashes to allow you to take many shots in a row of people coming through at high, like with as much flash power as possible. So that's probably it from a tech perspective. As far as what to bring to the workshop, make sure you got good shoes. You can bring some insect repellent, sunscreen, water, and maybe a little snack for halfway through is a good idea. And a nice padded bag for your camera and lenses is always a good idea too. If you have a strap that can go over your shoulder, I use these black rapid straps so that your camera can sit by your side. You don't have to have one of these, but it is quite comfortable to have it just hanging down here and pick it up like that. But a neck strap's fine as well. It's when you get into the longer lenses that you start to have the weight on a neck strap is no fun. So I'm bringing a 70 to 200 for most mountain bike shoots that I do. And then when I'm around the event, a 24 to 70 is a nice range. I'll also use a couple of different wide angle lenses. This one's a 14mm that allows me to get up close and personal and shoot nice wide shots as they come around techie sections of trail. I'll leave it at that. I look forward to seeing you there. If you haven't signed up, please do, and I will see you at Gap Creek on Sunday. Thanks, guys.